There was a man living in Judah whose name was Manoah, and he and his wife had no children. And one day an angel came down and told Manoah that his wife was going to have a baby boy. But that baby boy had a very special job that God wanted to do with him, and he was not to drink beer or wine, and he was never to cut his hair. And the angel disappeared. Well, when Manoah told his wife, she got all excited about it, and she said, I want to know too. So the angel came the second time and told them again, you're going to have a baby boy, but you mustn't cut his hair. You mustn't drink beer or wine. God has a special job for him to do. He's going to get the people free from the Philistines. Well, the baby was born. His name was Samson, and he grew up to be a man that was stronger than any other man alive. But Samson had a problem. He didn't have any self-control. And you know, I've told you that God says we must be able to control ourselves. So Samson had strength. Oh, he was really strong, but he didn't have self-control. Now, one of the things that God has told the people of Judah that they're never to do is to marry a heathen woman who believes in idols. Now, idols are just like, it's silly to talk to an idol. That's like talking to a statue of a little angel that's sitting on your mantle. It can't do anything when your mother's standing right there. If you've hurt yourself, you don't cry to the angel that's sitting on the mantle. Well, God didn't want his people crying to idols. And the Philistine people worshipped one that was ugly, ugly, ugly. I mean, it had the hands and the arms of a man and the body of a fish. Can you think of anything any uglier than that? And God had told the Israelites, do not marry anyone who worships idols. Well, one day Samson, who is so very strong, decided that he wanted to go where he didn't belong. He went down into the Philistine territory, and on the way, he met a lion. And he was so strong that he just killed the lion with his bare hands and left the body lying over on the side of the road. Well, when he got down into the Philistine territory where he didn't belong, he saw a beautiful young woman, and his eyes popped out and his heart began to beat, and he decided that that was the woman he wanted to marry, even though she's a heathen and worships idols. Well, he went back home and he told his parents, I've found the woman that I want to marry. You must get that woman for me. And they said, well, where does she live? And he said, in the Philistine territory. She's a Philistine. And they said, oh no, Samson, you can't do that. God has told us never to marry a heathen woman. Now, there are many beautiful girls that live here in Judah. You just can't do this. This is wrong, and you know it's wrong. And Samson said, I don't care. I love her, and I want her, and you get her for me to marry. Well, Samson went back down to marry the Philistine woman, and on the way, he passed the carcass of the lion that he had killed. And in the jaws of the lion, bees had made a nest, and they were making honey. And Samson went over and took some of the honey out and ate it. And he's broken another one of God's laws because you're not supposed to touch a dead animal. But he went right on. The wedding was planned. It would last 7 days. And they entertained themselves sometimes with riddles. So Samson got up in front of everybody and he said, I have a riddle for 30 of you men, and if you can tell me what the riddle means, I'll get you 30 new coats. And the men said, okay, Samson, what's the riddle? We can do it. And Samson said, out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet. Now, tell me what the riddle means. Well, they thought and they thought and they couldn't figure it out. They worked on it for 4 days. And when they couldn't figure it out, they went to the woman that Samson was to marry and they said, all right, he's making fools out of us. Now you figure out what that riddle means and tell us, because otherwise we're going to really look stupid. And so she said, all right, I'll try. So she went to Samson and she said, Samson, you're so strong. I just get goosebumps when I think about your muscles. And I'm so glad I'm going to be your wife. That's the cutest little riddle that you told the men. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. I've thought and thought and thought, Samson, and I can't figure it out. Please tell me what the riddle means. And Samson said, nope, can't do it. And only tell the men when the time is up. So she came to him the next day, and she came crying. And Samson said, please don't cry. What's the matter? Well, if you really loved me, you would tell me the riddle because I really want to know what the riddle means. And he said, I can't tell you the riddle. Well, you know, she came and cried for 3 days. Now, would you want to listen to a woman crying for 3 days? And so Samson said, I can't stand it any longer. Hush, woman, I'll tell you what the riddle means. And he told her that it meant that the lion was strong and there was something sweet in his jaws to eat because of the bees making honey. And that's what the riddle meant. Well, of course, she went immediately and told all the 30 men. So 7 days later, Samson says, okay, fellas, can you tell me the riddle? And they said, sure. Out of the eater came something to eat, that's a lion and honey. Out of the strong, that's the lion, came something sweet, that's the honey. And Samson was furious. He not only had no self-control and went where he didn't belong, but he could really get angry in a hurry. And he went out and killed 30 other men, grabbed their coats off of them, came back, threw the coats at the 30 men that had told him what the riddle meant, and he said, if you hadn't been talking to my girlfriend, you wouldn't have known. Actually, he said, if you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have known what the riddle was, and he left. Now, he left the wedding, and he's not married. And there sits the people. I don't know if they had wedding cake, but they had food, and everybody was there, and they'd been celebrating for nearly a week, and he's just gone. And there stands the bride with no bridegroom. Well, her father didn't think that was too good, so he got another guy out of the crowd he thought would make a good son-in-law, and he said, let's have the wedding anyway. No use to waste all this cake. And he married his daughter to another man. Now, Samson went back home. Surely, kids, surely he has learned that the Philistines are not his friends and that God's right. Surely he will never, ever go back. Right? Wrong. He got to missing the beautiful woman. And so he decided he'd go back again where he didn't belong, and he'd be ready to marry her. So he goes and knocks on the door, and the father comes to the door, and yes, Samson, he says, I've got a present. I'm here because I'm ready to marry your daughter. And the father says, well, there's just one problem, Samson. You left us, and we didn't have a groom, and we didn't have any wedding ceremony, and she's married to another man. Oh, he lost it again. He's just furious. And he leaves and he goes out and he ties the fuzzy, fluffy tails of foxes together, 2 of them together, and sticks a torch down in the middle. He did it to 40 foxes and he sent them running out through the cornfields, and they burned the corn and burned the grain and ruined the olive trees and just destroyed everything the Philistines had, and he went home. Well, now the Philistines are mad, really and truly angry. They're not going to let him get away with this. And so a whole group of Philistines went marching into Judah. And they went to where Samson lives, and they said, Samson, we want Samson. We want Samson. Get us Samson. And the Israelite people said, well, just hang on a minute. And they went to Samson and they said, the Philistines are here and they want you. And if you don't go, I think they're going to kill all of us. And Samson said, promise me one thing. You can tie me up, but don't kill me. So they tied him up and turned him over to the Philistines. Well, the Philistines were, yay, we've got Samson, we've got Samson. And they took Samson and they put him in jail, and they figured they had him. But in the middle of the night, Samson broke the ropes, got out of the jail, took the great big iron gates that were on the city wall, pulled them out of the ground, put him on his back, and walked way off and set him on a hillside in Judah. And he went home. Well, when the Philistines woke up the next day and went to the jail to get Samson, he's gone. And then somebody said, the gates of the city are missing. Where do you suppose they are? And then when they found them, they were actually in Israel, in the territory of Judah, up on a hill. Well, they decided they'd better let this thing alone. They weren't getting anywhere with Samson. And besides, kids, surely Samson has now learned his lesson, that you don't go where you don't belong, and you don't want what you shouldn't have, and you don't disobey God's rules. Surely he will never go back. Huh. Wrong. He has no self-control. And Samson begins to think about all those beautiful Philistine women. And one day he goes where he doesn't belong, right back to the Philistine territory. And he meets a young woman whose name is Delilah. And he wants to take Delilah out for pizza and a Coke or whatever one ate in those days. And Delilah says, well, I'll have to think about it. And the Philistines got a hold of Delilah and told her they'd give her a bunch of silver if she'd find out why Samson is so strong. So she agreed to go with him. They came home that night and back to her tent, and she'd fed him, and he was just comfortable with food, and he put his head down in her lap, and she stroked his hair, and she said, oh, Samson, you're so strong. You just give me shivers. And he said, oh, it's no big deal. Well, she said, why are you so strong, Samson? Oh, he said, if you tied me up with wet cords, I'd lose all of my strength. And he went to sleep. The Philistines are in Delilah's closet. And when she said, Samson, the Philistines are upon you, they came running out. The cords are cut. Samson got up, killed the Philistines, and off he went because he hadn't told her the truth. Well, only a dumbbell would go back again, right, boys? You're smarter than that. Nobody's going to turn around and go right back. She's lied to him. He went back, and he knocked on Delilah's door, and Delilah came to the door, and she said, well, what are you doing here? Well, I've come because I thought we could spend another evening together, Delilah. And she said, why would I want to spend another evening with you? You lied to me. Never mind the fact that she tricked him. And he said, oh, come on, Delilah. We enjoy being together. Let me in again. So she brought him in, and she fed him dinner, and he put his head in her lap, and she stroked his hair, and she felt his big muscles, and again she told him how handsome he was and how much she really loved him. And she said, do you really love me, Samson? Oh, yes, Delilah, you know I love you. That's a given. And he went to sleep. Well, before he went to sleep, she said, Samson, what makes you so strong? Oh, it's not a big deal. If you tied me up with new ropes, I'd lose my strength. And he went to sleep. And Delilah's got the Philistines in the closet again, and she cut the ropes, and then she hollered, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And they came out to grab him, and he just knocked them out of the way and left. Now, she's tricked him twice. Is he so dumb that he would ever go back again? Hasn't he learned that you don't go where you don't belong, you don't want what you shouldn't have, and you don't disobey God's rules? He went back, and he knocked on her door again. And she looked at him at the door, and she said, well, I don't know what you're doing at my house, Samson. I don't want anything to do with you. You don't really love me. And Samson said, oh, come on, Delilah. You know I love you. I know I told you a story about my strength, but you had the Philistines coming out to get me too, gal. So fair is fair. Come on, let's have supper together. And Delilah said, well, all right. And so he came in, and they ate. And when supper was over, he put his head in her lap, and she's crying. She's going. Boys, when girls begin to cry, run. That's a bad sign. And so Samson says, oh, come on, Delilah, don't cry. I can't have that sniffling. What are you crying about? You don't really love me, Samson. I know you don't really love me. If you really loved me, you'd tell me why you're so strong. Oh, Samson said, please, Delilah, stop the crying. I can't stand the crying. I'll tell you. Will you really? Yes, Delilah, I'll tell you. I'm strong because of my hair. If you braided it, I'd lose my strength. Now, Samson's got really long hair. And he went to sleep in Delilah's lap again, and the Philistines are in the closet. Very quickly, she began braiding his hair. And she braided his hair. When she got it all braided, she said, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he jumped up, knocked the Philistines out of the way, and went home. Now, you and I both know that only a real dummy would ever go back again. She's tricked him 3 times. He's got to know that she doesn't love him. And I don't think he loves her either. Well, the Philistines went to Delilah and said, Delilah, we're tired of this business. You've got one more chance. If you don't get it the next time, it's out. We're through. Well, Samson won't go back. He's got better sense than that. He's strong, and he's an Israelite, and he knows he shouldn't go into Philistine. He won't go back, right? Wrong. He went back, and he knocked on her door again, and she finally let him in, and she put on the crying act again. Please tell me if you really love me. So please don't cry. I just want to take my nap. Delilah, quit the sniffling. Well, if you loved me, you'd tell me. And so what does she do? She rubs his hair, and she gets him all comfortable, and then she begins to cry again, and Samson says, oh, Delilah, it's my hair. If you cut off my hair, I'll lose my strength. And he went to sleep. And she cut off his hair, and she said, the Philistines are upon you. And they came out and poked out his eyes and tied him up like an animal and took him out where he was just going to push a pole around all day long to grind the grain. That's what you usually had a donkey or an oxen to do, and Samson can't see. And all day long, that's all he does, just pushes the pole. And the people would come by and make fun of him. Nah, how does it feel now, Samson? You're not so strong. And Samson would just keep pushing the pole. Now, one day they decided to have a big feast and get all excited about the fact that they had captured Samson. And they have a temple, and it's got a flat roof. So people can not only be under the roof, but they can be on top of the roof. And it's got a pole in the middle, 2 poles that are holding up the roof. And they were having a blast. There were thousands of people on top of the roof and under the roof, and they're all making fun of Samson and to this dumb, ugly god that they called Dagon. Well, they ran out of things to do, and somebody said, well, why don't we go get Samson and bring him in here and we'll make fun of him? So they sent a little boy to get poor old blind Samson. But what they didn't realize is that his hair has been growing, and pushing that pole around all day long, his strength has come back. Well, the little boy leads Samson into the temple, and Samson says, would you please take me up to the posts in the middle so I can feel something? I can have my hands and I'll know where I am in the temple. And the little boy took him to where one of the big pillars was in the middle of the temple. And the people were making fun of Samson. And when they got tired of doing that and they weren't paying any attention, Samson put his arms around those 2 pillars. And he began to pull. And he began to pray that God would give him the strength again to do it. Now, God has given Samson the job of destroying the Philistines, and he's pulling, and all of a sudden there's dust falling, and the roof begins to crack, and the whole thing falls in, and it kills all the people on the roof and all the people under the roof, including Samson. Now, Samson has fulfilled what God intended for him to do. He's killed the enemy. But I don't think it had to be that way. It's that way because Samson disobeyed. Samson went where he didn't belong. He wanted what he shouldn't have, and he disobeyed God's rules. And the Philistines are dead, but so is Samson. Now listen, kids, there are a lot of things that you're told, go. Don't go to that movie. Don't watch that television. Don't leave the yard and go down and not tell mother where you've gone. Don't go where you don't belong. And there are a lot of things you want that you really shouldn't have. And if mama and daddy or the teacher or the Bible school teacher or the preacher says that wouldn't be good for you, then don't want what you shouldn't have. And more important than everything else, God has said honor your father and mother, and he said listen to your teachers, and so don't disobey God's rules. Samson did, and he lost his life.